I mean, is there a media, not that you have, a strict sort of profile of, people that you want to work with or promote or encourage, but, are there aspects to their media diet or their reading, certain things that are sort of good to see? I mean, is it news? You mentioned the world around you. Is it sort of specific trade information, being able to know which network is up and which is down, which label is up and down, publishing companies, what have you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if someone was going in for an interview with Cameron, you'd want them to know, if they want Smash last night.
Right.
I mean, you just want to be topical for the thing that you're actually doing. And when I say know about the world, I mean, you want people who do have a curiosity about the world beyond how the numbers for Smash.
Yeah,
but I think if you're going for, if you came for a meeting with me, you should know what magazines are in my group. I mean, I can tell a story. My nephew, who just got out of college, I got him an interview because he thinks, well, I might want to work at a magazine. So our head of HR said, fine, bring him in. He came in, shirt untucked, shoes, bad tennis shoes. And she's like, so, what magazine hero would you want to work for? He's like, I don't know. Oh. And she's like, well, what kind of job would you want to have? And he's like, well, I don't really know, what kind of jobs there are at the magazines. And she's like, okay, I talked to you because your aunt's my friend. Don't you ever do this again. Yeah. Wow. And he was mortified because he didn't know. He didn't know any better. Yeah. So, he didn't, and it surprised me, but, it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Don't just assume because someone introduced you to someone that you can just walk in the door and do that. You've got to do your due diligence. And even if you get a job somewhere, these jobs aren't permanent. They're not forever. Yeah. You got to keep working, and you've got to add value and take initiative. Don't just do what you're asked to do, but go to your boss and say, hey, I noticed this isn't happening. Do you need help with this? Or at the end of the day, stop by and say, hey, I'm getting ready to head out, but do you need anything? I mean, those are really good. They're not just suck up to the boss things. Yeah. Your boss really needs help often, and that's a good way to secure your job in your place.
Yeah, show value, for sure. Let's flip that anecdote around, although I love it, secretly, or not so secretly. But what are the, just do you have any great sort of, winning stories of an amazing email, a cover letter, a kind of moment in an interview where something just popped and, I don't know, you've been working with that person ever since, or you've sent them on their merry way and they've gone on to illustrious careers. If there's anything that you can isolate that's just, a moment or a sign where everything kind of came together, I think those are interesting insights.
I have one just today, which was really nice.
Wow, good timing.
I know, very good timing. When I first started at Sony, I got an email from a former colleague at Rubenstein, and she said, I have a friend of a friend of a friend, somebody who wanted to work in the music business. And so I did my, we're not hiring right now, but happy to meet you. And I met him, and he was the most, driven. It's like I thought that I was driven at his age. It's like I was such a slacker. I mean, he presented, first of all, he showed up in a suit and tie to a music company. So this is about as dressed up as I get for a music company. Now, when I was interviewing or meeting with my boss initially, I wore a suit, but generally day to day, the people that we meet with are, not dressed up. And he came in, and I said, I got a half an hour. And he must have talked for an hour. And it was so interesting, and he was so passionate about working in the music business, and he wanted to do some production work, and he wanted to do some working maybe at a music company. Anyway, long story short, I just thought, this kid's going to go someplace, and I'd love to help him. So I introduced him to 5 people, and I rarely do this, because I think unless I've met someone, I don't just, if someone emailed me, unless they're really close, unless it's my mom, I usually want to meet the person beforehand so that, you know what you're recommending, because it's obviously a reflection on me. So I wrote emails to people that I thought could really be helpful to this kid, and I met with him today, so it's 4 years later, and he runs his own business. He's working with Flo Rida, who's obviously a big artist on Atlantic, is managing 4 acts and is doing production work for 3 artists who, if I mention them, you would know them. And he's like, remember when you introduced me and this person did this for me? And he just like put it together for me in such a nice, first of all, it made me feel really good about myself. But two, I mean, it's like that's perfection. I mean, that's like he came in, he told you what he wanted. He took more of your time than you probably wanted to give, but he was so driven and he was so interesting. And he knew about our company and what we were doing, that you're happy to give it. And so, 4 years later, that hour, meant a lot for him. So that's a good thing.
I don't know if I can top that. I definitely can't top
I want to let that sink in for a minute. Sometimes you just got to take a beat.
I mean, I will say, I've had a number of instances where I will do an informational with someone or know of them, and they just want to come in and chat about the business, and there's nothing right for them at the time, but I keep a running file, and 3 months later, a year later, I'm asked for a recommendation, or there's a job all of a sudden that pops up, and I'll go back to that that informational. And so that's happened a number of times. I've actually had people where I have interviewed them for jobs multiple times, different jobs. And there's a woman who is now currently working within NBC Universal, and it was the third time was the charm. And I thought she was fantastic, and interviewed her twice. Couldn't quite get her in. She didn't want to. She wasn't ready. And the third time was the charm. And I've had that a couple of times where, they keep coming in, and I keep is sitting with them, but there's just not quite the right fit. But ultimately, it does click, and I think that's great. And so I guess the moral of this story would be, if you like a company or if you like a person, and I always say interview for a boss. But if you find a situation or find an environment that you think you want to be in, don't be shy about repeat. I mean, I've literally had this happen, I think, 3 different times where somebody keeps coming in and we finally found a place for them, and it's taken a couple of years for it to work out. But so that's a little bit to your
interesting, yeah.
Your answer.
Well, I
not as good as
had
that, though.
2 interns when I worked in network news that they just stood out because they totally got it. They were passionate about everything. They were the last person there. They knew who all the reporters were. They knew what needed to be and what didn't. And both of them now are senior vice presidents at media companies and communications. So they stuck with it. They stood out, and I knew they were going to go places.